So first off, apologies. I wanted to do a more extensive look at this sudden behind the scenes peek at Game of Thrones, but I'm just too busy with the Dune stuff as well as the Matrix stuff. I will try to do a more extensive video down the line. So what is the big news? Well, it's not much, but it is critical. Essentially, a new book on HBO has been published. It's not specifically about Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones is covered. Basically, it's charting HBO's history, and it has some delicious and juicy quotes where, again, we've been speculating about this, but now it's definitely confirmed. Both HBO and George Martin begged Benioff and Weiss to continue doing Game of Thrones. They wanted 10 seasons. They didn't like that the show was ending so suddenly with 8 seasons, but Benioff and Weiss were just determined to end it early on. And apparently, George even went to New York and personally tried to make his case that they continue doing the show, but they rebuffed him. And as we all know, they ended up making some, at the very least, very divisive seasons that, and I'm with the fans on this, but again, this is an analytic report, so I'm going to play devil's advocate. Even if you like the season, I think we can agree that season 8 generally met with a lot of criticism and a lot of puzzles too, in terms of not just the story, but why and how the production occurred. And basically, Tinderbox confirms some theories and speculations. It's not the whole story, but now we do know that, yes, George was aware that the story seemed to be diverging very sharply from his books and wasn't being fleshed out as well as he hoped. And he was very concerned that the end of the show would kind of distort what people might think of with Game of Thrones, including the books. Now, I want to stress, however, that he doesn't hate Benioff and Weiss. In fact, he reaffirms he actually likes them. Again, whether he means this or not, that's what the book says. So it's not something where he's condemning Benioff and Weiss. But he is disappointed that they decided to end it so early. And as far as I know, we still don't know why they ended it. Was it the money? Was it egos? Did they just want more control over at Netflix or over at Disney? We still don't have a full answer in terms of why they had to end it so quickly. Only that they wanted to end it quickly and were determined to do it, even speeding up or slowing down certain stories, even if it didn't make any sense. Now, it's very hard to even get a consensus on the fandom, right? You have the pure book readers, or you have the people who just watch the show, or you have the people who ignored the show completely, so on and so forth. But on the left and right, broadly speaking, there is a lot of overlap, namely that they cut off a lot of things in the books. And on the left, there's concern that there wasn't the representation that there is in the books, right? There's a lot more non-white characters and non-white cultures. There is also a lot more, for lack of a better word, sexual pluralism in the books than there is in the show. For instance, Cersei and Daenerys are lesbians, but they're not lesbians in the show. So the left is kind of split in terms of that the quote pro-left themes in the books were pretty much abandoned or softened. And on the conservative side, it's very similar that fidelity was lost in terms of how George was being very graphic in terms of depicting warfare and his deeper messages about military conflict, and even trying to keep a sense of continuity and coherence with how the battles were done. Again, I want to be careful here. George does have plot holes, but nevertheless, he did try to do both in terms of representation and as well as showing vividly, both in terms of sexuality as well as warfare, how brutal war can be. But the Benioff and Weiss approach was to really focus on scandals, cheap tricks, a lot of special effects, CGI, and so on and so forth. You have to concede that Benioff and Weiss did make a lot of good decisions. They did make some few good seasons and even wrote a few great episodes. They even, in some rare cases, improved the material. And they also gave a break to a lot of great people like Henwick, who is now in Matrix Resurrections. So it's not a totally black record, but at least in the immediate aftermath, and remember, it's only been 2 years, so far it seems most fans still agree it was a terrible season. They should remake it. They should apologize to the fandom. And I'm with them for the most part. Although whether that will ever happen is unclear. Certainly them being even nominated for the Emmys is still to me an insult, but there we are. There's also a lot of questions that this is going to spoil things for House of the Dragon and fans won't be able to move on. I don't think they will. They've been giving a lot of downvotes and a lot of nasty comments. So it's a lot of raw nerves, and so the book does confirm a lot of the worst fears. But again, I'm not here to do propaganda. If you go to the other channels, they kind of distort what happened because it is true that Benioff and Weiss did diverge sharply from the books, but not as much as people think. And in terms of the major storylines, this is in fact what George wanted, at least with certain characters like Bran or the Hodor twist or with Daenerys. Again, a lot of other channels I get have jumped on the bandwagon of hating D&D on everything, but they did change a lot of things. But in certain respects, they did actually follow George in the books. But until we read Winds of Winter, we'll not be able to confirm that. But from all my reporting, they did change a lot, but it's not as much as people think. It's very, very mixed. And at this moment, it'd be shocking to understand this, but if you go through the statistics, you know what the most popular show now is on HBO? The Sopranos. So at least in the immediate aftermath, it does appear that the Game of Thrones brand is very heavily damaged. But they're gearing up to do a lot of 10th anniversary celebrations. So we're going to see if the fandom has moved on or whether they're still going to demand more answers and more apologies from the aftermath of season 8. Thanks for listening.